why didn't the Jews get the body and march it out? Look, this is your Jesus. Where's the body? Where's the body? Where's the historical evidence? And why have I got to believe the Quran and not believe the people at the time? What happened? That is, thank you, that's my question to you.
Okay, are you finished? Finished, George?
You like that? Listen now the answer. But he's not going to tell you.
The Quran provides.
Thank you.
The
I'm
Quran.
not going to interrupt you.
No problem. The Quran provides an accurate historical insight into the reality of the debate regarding the crucifixion of Jesus. What the Quran mentions is that first of all, the Quran is refuting the Jewish claim that they killed and crucified Jesus, and that's a very important point, because the Quran is not refuting the Christians regarding the crucifixion of Jesus. The Quran is directly refuting the Jews, because in their Talmud they believe that they stoned Jesus to death and then they hung him on a tree, okay?
This is
on
what
a
the
pole.
Quran is saying.
So you have to understand, first of all, the Quran is not even refuting the Christians. The Quran is refuting the Jews. But Allah tells us that there are some Christians who doubted the crucifixion of Jesus. وَمَا قَتَلُهُ وَمَا صَلَبُهُ. They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُم. But it was only made to appear so. Now that is a refutation to the Jews. And then Allah talks about the reality of the Christians in the early Christian history. وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ. But those who disagree therein are full of doubts. Now Allah is talking about the Christians. That in early Christian churches, some of them doubted the crucifixion of Jesus. Now you mentioned about the substitution theory, that the Quran saying that Allah made you look like Jesus. Fine, let's grant that that's the case, but I don't agree with that interpretation. That's one of the interpretations. But you have to ask yourself, where does the Quranic commentators get these theories from, the substitution theory? Not from the Muslims, we get it from the Christian tradition. The Apocalypse of Peter, one of the early Christian documents, it mentions that the real Jesus was on the tree, while the one the Jesus lookalike was being crucified. This is not from the Islamic sources. This is from the Apocalypse of Peter. You have the Basilidians. The Basilidians were a group of early Christian sect that flourished in Egypt, that believed that it was Simon of Cyrene who was crucified instead of Jesus. Again, this is not a Islamic document, this is from early Christian documents. The question I want to ask you is, why do we have difference of opinion amongst the Christians about the crucifixion of Jesus? If the crucifixion of Jesus is a central doctrine in Christianity, why do we find different Christians disagreeing about the event? And I tell you why. Because you didn't have the New Testament. You didn't have the New Testament being canon. The Alexandrian church had the different canon books. The Basilidians that I mentioned earlier on, the ones who believed that it was Simon of Cyrene, believed that the one he interpreted comes from an unbroken chain back to Simon Peter. Yeah? So this is not an Islamic claim. Even the early Christians disputed. You didn't have the New Testament canon. The New Testament was canon in the year 397 at the Council of Carthage. Before that, the 27 books were not fixed. Different churches had different books. So the Basilidians, for example, those who believe it was Simon of Cyrene instead of Jesus, they followed a book called the Second Treatise of the Great Seth. And they believed that it wasn't Jesus. And let me give you another one. Do you know Ignatius? Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch. Now he died in 110 AD. He wrote 7 letters. One of his letters he wrote to the Trellians. And he's saying, my brethren, he's refuting those Christians who disbelieved in the crucifixion of Jesus. But why is he addressing my brothers? Because he wants, for the sake of unity, he wants the Christians to be united, everyone to believe that Jesus was crucified. So the point is, even Ignatius of Antioch acknowledged that in his time, and we're talking about the end of the 1st century to 2nd century, there were predominant amount of Christians who disagreed about the crucifixion of Jesus. You have the Docetists who say that Jesus was just a phantom. He wasn't really a human, it was just a human appearance. But so the Quran is absolutely correct. That amongst the early Christians, they disagreed. Now it only took it. Now, one second. What I'm saying to you is the Quran is 100% accurate to talk about the reality of the early Christians. Not everyone believed in the crucifixion of Jesus. And by the way, Do you not think that the Jews killed and rejected some of the prophets? Even if Jesus was crucified, that doesn't make you a kafir, doesn't make you a non-Muslim, because some prophets were martyrs. But the issue that we have is the doctrine of salvation, the doctrine of atonement of sin. That's the issue that we have with you. That's the reason why you have the Ebionites. The Ebionites were the early Jewish Christian sect. They believed that Jesus, they rejected Paul. They rejected the false apostle Paul. They also only accept the Gospel of Matthew, the Hebrew version. They do not believe that Jesus was God. They do not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus was a human prophet, which is in line with Islam. What they did say, they did believe that Jesus was crucified, but they never believed that Jesus died for their sins.
Yeah, but we're talking about crucifixion.
Right. I'm saying that some of the Christians, the reason why they disagreed about the crucifixion event is because some of them genuinely believe that Jesus wasn't crucified.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Quran is absolutely correct. And why the Quran came? The Quran, we believe, is a revelation from Allah. So Allah says, وَمَا قَتَلُوا يَقِينَ, they did not claim for certainty. But if there were Christians after the time of Jesus that did believe that Jesus was crucified, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were disbelievers, because the Ebionites, they believed Jesus was crucified, but they didn't believe that Jesus died for their sins, because that is what we call, that's the problem that we have. So actually, number one, the Quran actually tells us historically the reality of early Christians, and the Quran is refuting the Jewish claim, not the Christian claim, because the Quran was conscious of the early period of Christianity that not all Christians believe in the crucifixion of Jesus. That's the first point. So therefore the Quran is historically correct, and it is consistent that some Christians rejected the crucifixion of Jesus. Now I want to get to your point about the messianic prophecies. You mentioned that the Old Testament prophets prophesied the crucifixion, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If that is the case, why do we find the disciples doubting Jesus to be resurrected on the third day? Why did they doubt? If we have Old Testament prophecies that speaks about this Messiah will be risen on the third day, why do we have the Messiah doubting? They didn't expect Jesus to be raised from the dead. In fact, if you read the Gospel of John, the disciples carried on doing their fishing. They carried on business as usual. Then they heard that Jesus was resurrected. And you mentioned about Bar Ehrman. Bar Ehrman says that the crucifixion is a historical fact. You misconstrued what he's saying. He's saying that since Jesus was a historical figure, and the earliest documents that we have about the life of Jesus is the Gospels, if there was a natural death, it'd probably be a crucifixion. Because you know how the historical critical method works? It's based on probability. Bar Ehrman is saying that, okay, if we go by the historical documents that this is how Jesus died, then naturally, okay, it makes sense that Jesus probably did die a natural death, which is crucifixion. But you don't mention when Bar Ehrman disagrees about the resurrection of Jesus. No. I'll tell you why. Because resurrection is a claim of supernatural. It's not a natural explanation, right? So, and this is more of the reason why the Christians, when they heard that Jesus was resurrected, right? Because for them, a crucified Messiah is a failed Messiah. Because according to Deuteronomy, a crucified person is a curse. So they need to fit the square, because they genuinely thought that Jesus was the Messiah. So now they need to concoct a story. So when they heard Jesus was resurrected, in the Greek mythology, anyone who's resurrected from the dead becomes a god, a pantheon god. So if you read Bar Ehrman's book, How Jesus Became God, this is exactly what he's saying. That because some of the apostles believed Jesus was resurrected, not the apostles, the second generation, not the apostles, the second generation of Christians, when they heard that Jesus was raised from the dead, because they were influenced by Greek philosophy, they were living in a Hellenistic environment, automatically they made him a god, a pantheon, just like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, the Roman emperor, was made as a god. Okay? And this is why Allah says in the Quran, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ أُزَيْرُ ibn Allah, that the Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, while the Christians say the Messiah is the son of God. Such are the words that coming out of the mouth. They only imitate the disbeliefs of old. So when you say that Jesus is the begotten Son of God, he's raised on the third day, he's a man God, you're only imitating the Greek polytheistic religions. You have Justin Martyr, for example, when he was addressing to the pagans, he said, "What you believe about Zeus, about sons of God, is no different to us."
Stick to the crucifixion.
Right.
Finish off on the
So I'm
crucifixion.
saying, first of all, from the early Christian history, the Christians did not have a consensus about the crucifixion of Jesus because it had no theological relevance.
Okay.
That's my point. So even if some Christians believe Jesus was crucified, it doesn't negate the fact that it doesn't negate the doctrine of salvation. It doesn't necessarily mean that they believe Jesus died for their sins, like the Ibnites. So I'm saying to you, if you look at your church history, it's not that Islam made up about that denying the crucifixion of Jesus. Your own early Christians denied the crucifixion of Jesus. So I'm asking you now, if the crucifixion of Jesus is such a central doctrine in Christianity, why did the Christians disagree about it?
Okay.
And your religion is that a monotheism.
So then, we started off with, my question was, what evidence do you have outside the Quran
Church history.
that's
the evidence.
crucifixion didn't happen?
Yeah, that's the church history. The very fact.
And the church
yeah,
history.
Yeah. So let me get my point.
So-
The very fact that the early Christian churches did not have a consensus on the crucifixion is an evidence that you can't say it's a historical fact, because the Christians disagreed amongst themselves.
1 minute.
You're making it sound like every Christian believed in the crucifixion of Jesus, and this is not the reality. This is not the reality in church history.
Right.
This is why so many Christians are shocked. Because when I speak about this, the Basilidians didn't believe Jesus was crucified. It was Simon of Cyrene. The substitution theory didn't come from the Muslims. It came from the early Christians. They can't believe it, and I agree. They can't believe it because nobody told them about it. So now the onus is on you, George, to tell me that if the crucifixion of Jesus is such an important foundational doctrine, why were you Christians disputing it? Why were you disagreeing about the crucifixion?
I'll tell you.
Yeah, go on.
Have you finished now?
Okay.
Thank you. Good. Very good. I'm not shocked at what you're saying.
Okay, so the Quran is correct? No,
The
conjecture.
Quran, what you've just said is, respectfully I say this
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
the Quran, there's no divine revelation of, something we didn't know. It's taken some groups of people saying, the crucifixion didn't happen.
So why is it not a historical consensus among the Christians?
Let me finish. I'll tell you, I'm not going to
Okay,
answer you.
okay.
That was heretical.
Just like, so it took from what other groups of people saying, the crucifixion didn't happen, like other stories in the Old
No,
Testament.
that's not the point.
The other stories. No, let me finish.
I'm saying why was there no historical consensus?
Wait a minute, I'm going to answer you.
Okay,
Good answer.
go on, George.
So just like it took from the Old Testament, New Testament, which I agree is not to do with this, but it has as well. But it also takes now events of what some groups of people say, the crucifixion didn't happen, and it's all put in. There's no divine thing that happened there, but that's irrelevant anyway, and I agree with you. So. But let me tell you something. The Eastern Orthodox Church. Now first of all, let's finish with the doubting. There were people that doubted, that the crucifixion happened, the resurrection happened, or the crucifixion happened, or the crucifixion happened, but the resurrection didn't happen, and all this, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. And yet, you have Gospels where Jesus went up to Thomas, doubting Thomas, and he said, put your finger here in the holes. And he says, my Lord, my God. He identified him not only of the resurrection, but also the divine, that he's God as well. Please don't finish, because it was a very big blaspheme to say, my Lord, my God, even as a surprise, my Lord, my God. It's a big blaspheme. Jesus didn't correct him.
You failed to understand one point. The New Testament was not canonized until 397, which means, Mark, thank you. Which means that early Christians, I'm talking about the 1st century, 2nd century, they had their own canonical books. They had their own books that they accept. So, for example, the Basilidians They didn't accept the New Testament. They didn't accept
let me finish.
They only accept the second treatise of the Great Seth, which it says that it was Simon of Cyrene that was crucified and not Jesus.
Yeah, what manuscript is that one?
Right, you can find it. It's in the second treatise of the Great Seth.
What date was that one?
It's in the 2nd century.
2nd century.
Yes.
But I'm not.
Yes.
I'm talking about very first. I'm talking about when the eyewitness is
Yeah,
still
but
around.
what was the canonical status in the Gospel of John?
Well, wait a minute. Let me.
No, wait, George, 1 second. Was the New Testament, was it fixed? Was it canonized? Was it fixed in the first 300 years? Later.
Whatever.
Okay, so why do you have different churches having different books?
No.
They don't?
No. Let me finish.
Okay.
There is, but we are going to get onto that if you want to. But I just want to finish my point here, right?
Okay.
So you had Jesus there, showing and demonstrating of the resurrection, right? Now, the living tradition of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which was one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which still is today, which was at that time one church. Before manuscripts were written down, there was the oral tradition from Papias, shows how that worked, where even where Paul in his...
Stop there.
No, you
stop, wait, stop there 1 second.
Yeah, but you keep interrupting
Stop there
me.
1 second. You mentioned about the living tradition. So why does the Gospel of John state that the disciples did not expect Jesus to be resurrected? If they really believe that the Old Testament prophesies that he would be raised on the 3rd day, does that even make sense? If the disciples understood from these Old Testament that this Messiah will be crucified and he'll be raised on the 3rd day, why does the Gospel of John portray the disciples not expecting to be resurrected? And I'm telling you the reason why, because it's conjecture. This is what the Quran is saying.
But you
It's
can't-
guesswork.
it
It makes no sense.
No,
If-
wait a minute. This is a matter of interpretation, what
No,
you're saying.
no, this is what Gospel of John says.
Please don't interrupt me.
Okay.
Because I'll let
Sorry.
you're
Carry on.
You're mentioning the Gospel of John, but you don't mention...
You mentioned it, not me.
No, the New Testament I mentioned.
No, you mentioned Gospel of John specifically. Are you aware that the Gospel of John?
Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
go on.
So let's talk about... Well, why don't you talk about John, the first verses, when he talks about become flesh. The word of
That's
God.
the doctrine
and
of
he came back.
incarnation. I'm talking.
No, but
look, you're the one that brought about
Oh,
crucifixion.
Let me finish. Let me say my point. Let me finish my
Okay,
point.
go on.
And then we go on to...
Yeah, because I got to pray as well. Like,
yeah,
a couple
no,
minutes,
I want to go to prayer as well, man.
Yeah, I need to pray.
We both need to go to prayer. So, what I'm saying, you mentioned John, but I mentioned John, but you mentioned that point, but you don't mention the other point where he says that...
Yeah, but you don't mention when John's gospel state that the disciples didn't expect Jesus to be resurrected. So if the disciples were Jews and they understood from these Old Testament prophecies that the Messiah will be resurrected, then surely the disciples should have expected him to be resurrected. But they were shocked. They didn't expect to be resurrected. And the reason why that story doesn't make sense is because the Gospel of John cannot be relied upon. We don't know who wrote them. We don't know who wrote it.
No, we do know. Let me finish.
Okay.
The living... Now you're going to let me finish.
Yes,
You interrupt me again.
Yes.
So the living tradition
Yes.
of the Eastern Orthodox Church, the church, okay, before the Gospels were written down, there were Christians already dispersed. Something did happen. Do you agree there?
Yeah,
Something
yeah, I
happened.
agree. I agree with that.
So is that what happened while they dispersed and had all their churches in all different geographical locations?
So why do they have different books?
So wait a minute. So
why do you have the Basilidians?
No, let me finish my point.
Okay.
Because we're talking about crucifixion bit.
Right.
We can talk about books and that, but the crucifixion bit. Why would they go and have all these different churches before God was written down? Eyewitnesses going to different locations. Don't forget Roman roads around, Greek language everywhere, like English today. Easy. So eyewitnesses going today. We're in Bethlehem or whatever. I'm going to Syria, and I saw, and this is what happened before the Gospels were written down. Don't interrupt me, please.
I'm thinking. Go on.
Why is it the unanimous mainstream Christians believe there was a crucifixion that happened? And let me finish.
That's not true.
And
And I mentioned this earlier on.
I know.
I mentioned everything earlier on.
I know.
Okay.
If you let me finish, then
Okay,
you can
go
say
on.
your
I
point.
apologize.
No, don't apologize. Mainstream Christianity was these churches everywhere
Define mainstream.
in different geographical locations.
At what period are we talking about?
We're talking about before AD 30.
Wait,
There were no churches before
There were no
AD
churches
30.
before AD
1
30.
minute.
No, you said all the mainstream Christians accepted the crucifixion of Jesus. I'm asking you, what period are you talking
All
about?
right. When was the oldest? The oldest manuscript we got is
For what?
from, say, the P64, is it?
52.
P52.
P52. What date is that?
That's like
Second half of the second.
yeah, second half of
century.
the 2nd century.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
All right. 1 minute.
It's in
The Gospels-
Manchester.
The
Manchester.
Gospels we know
Yes.
are written before 70 AD, AD 70. They don't mention massive events like the destruction of the temple.
Right. So here's the problem. What was the canonical status on these 4 Gospels? Did all Christians accept
They
the 4
didn't
Gospels?
have a canonical status.
Do you know
But
why?
that
Let me
doesn't-
tell you why.
No.
Because let me tell you why.
You
Wait,
won't let
one
me
second.
fin- you won't
Let me tell you
finish?
why.
You made the point though.
I love
George,
you,
you
man,
know,
but he
you
just
know-
doesn't
yeah,
let me
but George-
finish
but
my
you didn't-
point.
Yeah,
No,
but
but
you
you
did
made the
make a
point.
point. You made the point.
Yeah, but let me finish and then,
Okay,
you
I
know what?
apologize. Go on.
When I say why,
Okay.
I mean it in the sense of not for you to
Oh,
answer
oh,
that.
okay, fair enough.
So
fair enough.
just think,
I didn't know
and
about
then
that.
you come
Genuinely,
back
I didn't know
and
about
nice
that.
one.
Okay,
and
go on.
then come back and
All right,
talk.
all right.
Let me. What I'm saying, as my point, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
They don't, as an evidence, like they don't mention the destruction of the temple, which happened in AD 70 or AD 72.
80, 70.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a lot before that. They don't mention Paul's death or whatever it was. I can't remember now.
In the book of Acts, it doesn't
Yeah,
mention
they
Paul's
don't.
death.
These are
Right.
massive events,
Right.
right? They
Okay.
don't mention these things.
Right.
Now, if there is no canonical
Status.
books, does not mean to say that the events that happen, which they claim happened,
Yeah.
didn't happen. This is very important. Relax. Let me finish. I know it's such a really good subject to
Okay,
talk
go on,
about.
go on, go on.
This doesn't mean, and these things, what you're saying, groups of people doubted. If I was to,
Why?
if I'm in Jerusalem, I'm one of the disciples. I see the crucifixion, the resurrection, and I'm speaking to this man. And we saw, and then we start dispersing all the people.
Okay.
500 that were after the crowd. So you won't
Okay,
let me finish.
okay.
right
No,
now.
I gotta pray. I gotta pray.
All right, you got to pray.
But
we've got to pray.
I have one
We will
question for you.
talk
You
again
carry on.
next
I have
time,
a
next
question
time
for
we're
you.
gonna go deeper into
You
it.
didn't answer the question. Why do we have diverse opinions among the Christians about the crucifixion?
Because
If you have the 4 Gospels, that settles the matter.
So
that
what-
Jesus was
because-
crucified. Then why do we
you have diversity, because
Why?
not everyone was there to see this.
No. It's
No,
because
no.
not everyone accepted the 4 Gospels, my
No,
friend.
wait a minute.
That's why.
Yeah, because you had
Most
you had
did not.
you had Marcion.
the-
Marcion didn't agree with the Old
Yeah.
Testament.
Exactly.
Do you know his
That
is the-
doesn't mean he was right.
No, but his
Wait a
is the
minute,
earliest
Wait a
canon.
minute.
What's the earliest canon?
Unanimously, all these were refuted. That's why you
No,
have the
no,
council.
No, you didn't have the New
to protect-
Testament.
the
We
Marcion
have
canon.
sorry.
the living tradition and of the church is the
Doesn't
New
exist.
Testament.
Doesn't
It doesn't
exist.
exist.
It
Is
doesn't
the New
exist.
Testament.
You do not have
the
a living
church,
tradition.
the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Eastern Orthodox Church is the infallible New Testament.
What does Catholicos mean?
So, I'm gonna
Catholic means universal.
I'm gonna pray now.
Nice one. Universal.
I'll be back, George. Don't worry. I'll be back. I'll be back.
No, you won't be back because I'm off to go now.
Okay, no
Next
worries.
time, have another
Inshallah,
chat.
okay.
We
Okay.
carry on the crucifixion. Because
will
I'm
tell
not
you-
happy.
I will prove-
because I agree this. I agree there's splinter groups and there's people that say this and that.
Next time,
But the mainstream and all these people dying martyrs' death and people that saw and died martyrs' death is a big thing. It's not just our brainwash.
So would you say
they've
the-
actually
so
saw
would
it
you-
and then they go and die.
So would you say the Quran is historically correct when it says that early Christians doubted the crucifixion of Jesus?
Were groups? Of
Yeah,
course
then
they
the
were.
Quran is correct.
Why?
The Quran is. Did you mention it to him?
Why?
Yeah, I
The
mentioned
Quran.
it to him.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
There you go.
There you
Why?
go.
Just because there's a group of people say, oh no, the crucifixion didn't happen, and the Quran 650 years later
Yeah.
quotes them people,
No, it
that
doesn't quote
doesn't
them.
mean the Quran
it
is
doesn't
correct.
quote
Then
them.
people
it doesn't
might be
quote
It
them.
doesn't quote them.
It's talking about the reality of the early Christians that doubted the crucifixion
And the
of
Jews.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself,
Yeah,
what
because
if you
the Quran,
if
the
you
Quran
wait one
can't-
second.
No,
George,
no,
George.
no, no, no. The
go on.
Quran can't say, oh no, it was true that the other Christians that did start all the churches, die martyrs' death. Oh, they were correct, because if that was the case, there wouldn't be no Quran.
George.
Wouldn't need Muhammad then, would we?
George, you know when you mentioned that the Quran came 600 years later and it says that Allah made someone else look like Jesus, I don't accept that interpretation. That's one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's go down that route. Where do you think the substitution theory came from? Who made that first claim? The Muslims? No.
But it's written
It's
in
from
the Quran.
it's from the
No, it's not written in the
Christians.
Quran.
It's not in the Quran. but
They're
I'm
not
s-
Christians.
I'm saying the substitution.
It's not Christians.
One
They
second.
wouldn't be Christians if they said it like that.
One second. And who decided
There
who's
were
Christian?
groups of people that might have said that.
No. The reason why you had diverse opinions about the crucifixion of Jesus is because you didn't have a fixed canon.
It was minor.
One second. You didn't have a fixed canon to resolve the dispute. Okay? If the four gospels unanimously stated that Jesus was crucified, surely we should have seen all Christians accept that.
Okay, I'll tell you what we do next time we come.
Okay,
Yeah?
go on.
We'll have a chat. Look into how much of the population or of those people were. I think it was Ebionites. Were?
The Ebionites,
Yeah. Have a look how much population they were,
Yeah.
and the people that denied the crucifixion, and how many people believed or
That's a good
agreed
point.
to the crucifixion. This is very important because
That's why
You're
Ignatius.
going to see
Yeah.
them as a very minority
No,
people.
okay. Here's what I'm going to do. Why did Ignatius have to bring the matter up if it's such a minor opinion? Because he knew in his time, because he died in around 108 AD. So we're talking about the early 2nd century, and he lived from mid 1st century. The reason why he wrote his letter to the Trillians about this is to refute a predominant amount of Christians who did not believe the crucifixion of
The
Jesus.
reason why it shows you they are very diligent and careful not to allow, this is a very important point now here,
Right.
not to allow false teachings and false things about the crucifixion and about the events that happened. That's why we had the councils, because of course there were local churches.
Okay.
No, you interrupt me.
Okay, go on, George. Carry on.
That's why you have churches. Some local churches or local groups
good.
would disagree with each other.
Okay.
But the unanimous of all the Christians, the mainstream people, and the mainstream church,
Okay.
the bishops and the churches all agree. That's why we had the councils, to preserve and to protect, not to invent new doctrines and new things. Right?
Okay, can I come in?
Go on.
You see, I'm going to disagree with you. I'll tell you why. Because the definition of orthodoxy is based upon the imperial establishment. I'll tell you why. You know, after the Council of Nicaea,
Yeah.
you have it happened in 325 AD. Now, who convened the Council of Nicaea? Constantine.
Yeah.
Did you know that Constantine had two sons, Constans and Constantius?
Yeah.
Constans was a pro. No, we have to be serious. Constans,
serious, man. I'm just-
I think it was Constans. He was a pro Trinitarian, meaning he agrees with the Nicene Creed.
Yeah.
Right. So when he came in power, the Orthodox position was the Nicene Creed. But did you know his second son, Constantius, was a pro-Arian,
Yeah.
and he convened two councils in 359. The two councils were called the Council of Rimini and the Council of Seleucia. And guess what? The Orthodoxy is no longer Nicene Trinitarianism; it's Arianism. So I'm saying the Orthodoxy. Wait, one second. I'm saying the Orthodoxy is defined by the imperial establishment. When an emperor agrees with the Nicene Trinitarianism, that becomes the Orthodoxy. When the Arians come into power, then Arianism becomes the Orthodoxy. So you have to be consistent saying.
what? I'll
Wait,
tell you what.
one second. If Arianism was an Orthodox position, then you have to. If you were to live at that time, between 359 to 381, then if you disagree with the Arian Orthodox, then you're a heretic. So this definition of Orthodox is very fluid and loose. It's not fixed.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
All this
Yeah.
is irrelevant. We are trying to prove, did the event of the crucifixion and resurrection happen? Was it Jesus on the cross?
If you had the four Gospels, that settles the dispute.
We don't need
One second.
We
No,
didn't
one
need
sec-
no
no,
gospels.
George. Yeah,
We-
orally.
We had the church
Let's say
there
oral tradition.
and the
Let's-
living oral
I get it.
tradition.
Let's say you have the oral tradition of the four Gospels. Do all the four Gospels state very clear that Jesus was crucified? Yes or no?
Yeah.
No room for interpretation otherwise.
Whatever you write down, black and white, You can easily interpret differently.
You're not understanding the point. Do the
You
four?
can always. There's always room to interpretation in anything.
Right.
That's why we have the councils there.
Do the Gospels
and the church, so we don't interpret it the way we want.
I know, but you're not getting the point.
There is no private interpretation.
You're not getting the point, George. Do the Gospels state very clear that Jesus was crucified? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Should that resolve the matter?
Yeah.
So why do we have early Christians that disagree?
Because you do get that.
No.
In any
Right.
just like with the Quran, you
No.
get disputes.
No.
You get different interpretations.
No,
Look at the Shias.
No, George, I'm talking about the status of Scripture. It's the status. If the four Gospels was accepted by all, wait, one second. If the four Gospels was accepted in first century, and it states clearly that Jesus was crucified, then every Christian should believe in the crucifixion. But we don't see that in history, and the reason because I recommend you a book called The Biblical Canon by Lee Martin MacDonald. And he says that different Christians have different books of canon. That's why some of them disbelieved in the crucifixion of Jesus, because they don't accept the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's later on. You didn't even know the names of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John until the 3rd century. So that's my point.
No,
I'm saying what the Quran is depicting is correct. That early Christians disagreed about the crucifixion of Jesus.
Okay, let me tell you.
That's the point.
Quickly, and then we finish it.
Yeah. I need to pray.
You touched on the authors.
Yeah.
You touched on the authors.
Yeah. I need to pray.
There are hundreds,
Jazakallah khair.
100 years before the Gospels and 100 years after the Gospels. No author, most authors didn't have to put their name down on the books to identify themselves as authors.
No. Ish. Oh, put them in there.
He's already very late for prayer, that's why. Yeah?
Sorry about that, man.
He does it anytime there's a Muslim coming.
Next time I want to.
Yeah. This is alright. We don't mind talking to you and everything. Yeah. Cool.
Is that the other guy in the background, the guy, the tall guy? Is that the tall guy?
Yeah.
What's that name of that book you said?
I didn't hear it. Because me, I don't dive into secondary sources. I don't know the evidence is I don't dive into secondary sources that much. Okay. I like to go to the.
I want that book.
He's just gone up there to freaking to pray. He's somewhere over there. So inshallah.
I want that book.
The mic's not in there.